Well, thank you for joining me. Today's video is going to be a discussion on 5 books that I recently finished reading. If your interest is piqued, keep in mind that down in the description below, I'll have Amazon links for every single one of these books so that you can avail yourself with. It could be that you've finished reading something, you're looking for something new. But keep in mind, Father's Day is coming up, and chances are, if I like these books, well, somebody in your life might like them too, even if you don't. So it's always a good gift idea. All right. So the first one I'm going to start off with is one called The Sisters Brothers. This takes place back in the mid 1800s, written by Patrick DeWitt. It all begins on the Oregon Trail. These two men are Charlie and Eli's sisters. They're hired killers. But the brothers have very dissimilar personalities. Charlie is very cold-blooded, ruthless, quick on the trigger. He doesn't mind taking on jobs. He doesn't ask a lot of questions. He's very mission-driven. Eli, on the other hand, is compassionate. He has a hard time doing this. He does it because he feels like it's what he has to do. He's somewhat loyal to his brother. It's kind of what they've always done, and there's trouble along the way. You see, these two men, these two brothers, are hired to kill a man named Kermit Warm. Kind of a strange name, right? Kermit Warm. They don't know what he's done. They figure he's probably stolen something, but they don't really know. Like I said, they don't ask questions. They just go out and they do their duty. Well, it's somewhat perplexing, especially for Eli, the soft-hearted one. Even though he's able to pull the trigger and do what he does, he does have some difficulties with it. And this is what makes it interesting, the dynamic between the two brothers. There's gunfights, there's whorehouses, there's all sorts of strange things that happen, and I had a lot of fun with this. It's an easy read. You'll find out that as they get closer to making their mark, that the person that they're supposed to kill could actually benefit from them. And the job becomes increasingly complicated as they realize that they could be backstabbed, and they need to nip this in the bud. The ending does not disappoint. I thought it was written very well. In fact, there's been a movie made about this. I think it's on Netflix. I'm going to check it out. It's not like brand new. In fact, this book itself was written in 2011. I'm not sure when that movie came out, and I'm curious as to how far they strayed from the script. So I have fun with this one. I think you will too. If you have somebody in your life who likes the Old West and things like that, I think they'll like this. I'm not a big reader of Westerns, but this was fun. All right, the next one I'm going to share with you is one written by Seth Godin. I've talked about this in other videos. It's a very inspirational book. Seth Godin, he's very good at marketing. All right, he has so many ideas. He's known for writing a blog a day. He's probably done this for well over a decade. And he has so many gems of wisdom to share that's almost endless. You can't listen to him or read anything he's written without feeling motivated and realizing that you need to start doing something. Well, Tribes was written, gosh, this is actually an old book by now. And this was actually published back in 2008. In fact, some of the things he refers to is a little outdated, but the principles are not. So anyway, it's called Tribes, We Need You to Lead Us. It's all about how you need to assume the mantle to lead people where you want to go and to where they want to go. And you might feel distinct and separate from everybody in your desires and your drive. But there are other people just like you, and they are your tribe, and you may not have connected with them. And maybe you're waiting on somebody else like you to come along and help you to get to where you want to go. But he gives you very sound advice in learning how to, like I said, assume the mantle yourself and take other people along with you. I love everything he's written. In fact, I'm getting ready to read another one of his books. And what I like about these is there's no chapters. They're very short. And so you can pick them up and read them anytime you want. You can whiz through the book easily in a day. There's nothing to it, but man, there's even though the book is small, it is just loaded with ponderables. And I would suggest anything he's written. If you haven't watched anything by Seth Godin, just look him up on YouTube. You're going to find plenty about him. He is the one that everybody wants to interview. All right, and when he talks, people listen. So Tribes is very good if you like that kind of thing. Now here's one that I wanted to read for a long time, and I immensely enjoyed this. This is Candide by Voltaire, and this was. Let me see. I didn't even look. I didn't even check to see when this was originally published. Anyway, in the 18th century at some point, and yeah, 1759. 1759. So, I was very intrigued by this. Voltaire is a very controversial figure, at least he was in his day. He was a thinker, a critic. He was very cynical, very skeptical. And whether you agree or disagree with his stances on anything, he's certainly worth paying attention to and considering. Now, Candide is about a young man who he falls in love with a young woman, but their paths are divergent. Things occur which takes them far and wide, ever so separate from each other. It's kind of it's a love story. It's a love story, and Candide finds himself propelled in many different directions and wondering if he can ever get back to his beloved. I think her name is pronounced Cundigond. Cundigond. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That's how I read it. And he can't get her out of his mind. There's death and murder and all these things that happen to them, and they lose track of each other. And so he's always working his way back to her. And all these interesting characters intersect in the story. Philosophers, pirates, and so on and so forth, kings and sultans, and all that good stuff. And there's definitely a pattern. Here's the thing I like about this, and this reads very much like a fable. In fact, this is going to be one of my very soon rereads. Okay, it's not a very long book, but I don't reread too many books. This will definitely be one of them that I do, though, because I felt like there's so much more that I could have gotten from this. And I don't even want to read what anybody else has said about it. I just want this to personally hit home with me on a level that was not influenced by anybody else. And I love the way this ended, because although it's a love story, it doesn't end so romantically. Okay? And I think it was very brave of Voltaire to do this. And in a sense, what he does is he presents the fantastical and the romantic ideals that we all have, and then it brings it all back down to reality. And basically what I felt like in the end was he was saying, this is how life really is. This is how it could possibly turn up. Are you ready for that? Are you prepared for that? And that's what I felt like Voltaire did. And so I love this book, even though at different points I felt like I didn't understand some things. I still felt very compelled by it. So I do recommend Candide. All right. Another one that I finished reading was American Lion. This is written by John Meacham. American Lion. This is Andrew Jackson in the White House. I've read another book by John Meacham called Jefferson, The Art of Power. I enjoyed that likewise. Okay, so this book is heavy. I mean, it's quite literally heavy, but it's also heavy in content. It's very thick. Even though it's thick, it's probably about 365 pages. You would think that would make the print large, but I don't know. It just seems much longer than what it really is, but it did take me a while to get through, I felt like. Now, I read this because I didn't really know much about Andrew Jackson, but I knew just a little about him, enough to know that I didn't like him. Okay, and I love reading about presidents, but I wanted to find out more, and I figured this was a good way to do it, and I did learn a lot about him. Well, in the end, let me just tell you right up front. In the end, I still don't really like Jackson, but I have to respect him. I don't think I would have liked him in person. I wouldn't have wanted him as a friend. I don't think I probably would have liked him as a president. But that's not to say he wasn't a good president. But in other ways, he was also very controversial because, well, he was very hated in a lot of ways, but loved at the same time. Not unlike, modern presidents. I mean, it's the same old story. But what I didn't like about him in the past was I knew that he was involved with driving the Cherokee Indians out or driving them west, and also that he had slaves and things like that. But I I didn't know enough to know what I could respect about him. What he is remembered for is saving the Union. The Civil War, as we know it, almost occurred 30 years prior to when we to what we think of it, 1860s, but it actually almost occurred in the 1830s. It was going on back then, and even the drive for the abolition of slaves was occurring back then. Well, that was all going all the way back to the founding of our country, but Andrew Jackson saved our Union. His own Vice President Calhoun worked against him vigorously. Talk about drama. Talk about drama. I just can't imagine a president having a vice president that was so contradictory to him. But that's kind of how things work. Things weren't as smoothed out back then as they are now. And so he had that going against him. A lot of people in his own administration were counter to what his wishes were. But he wanted to save the Union. South Carolina really fought against it. And a lot of it had to do over slavery, even though Jackson himself had slaves. Now, apparently, he treated them very well, but other times he didn't. And this is where it becomes very confusing. This is a man who had what he would consider high morals. He had a great work ethic. He loved the American people, but not all liberties in his mind extended to everyone, being the slaves. And so it's kind of confusing. It's kind of confusing because you go, man, I really don't like this guy. But on the other hand, he was a strong figure, and he really pretty much saved the nation. And I find that quite fascinating. Now, one of the things that really took up a lot of time in the book was two characters by the name of John and Margaret Eaton. John Eaton was his Secretary of War, but he was married to a woman named Margaret. She was apparently had a very promiscuous past, and the people within the orbit of Jackson and Eaton did not like this at all, and it created a lot of drama, ate up a lot of his attention, and he had to make some very crucial decisions in and casting away some people because he was not going to be dictated by others. Because they were trying to convince him that if you continue to have these two people in your midst and continue to cavort with them, we're not going to have anything to do with you. And he says, "Well, let me stop you in your tracks. This is working the other way. I'm not going to kowtow to you, and you're not going to tell me who I can and cannot have in my life." And I'm summarizing my own words, but Jackson was strong all the way around, and he's definitely worth reading about. Would I reread this? Well, not right away. It might be years before I ever pick it up again, but I do recommend, if you like reading about presidents, I think that Andrew Jackson is very important to know about. He's one of the most pivotal presidents in our nation's history. And I think whether you love him or hate him in the end, you're going to be glad you knew more about him so you can reflect accurately on our nation's past. Now, the last one. This one was so interesting to me. It's called The Curse of the Marquis de Sade. Now, the Marquis de Sade was oh wow, he was not a good person at all. He lived in the early 18th century, prior to the French Revolution, and man, he was a bad individual, full of sexual promiscuity. There wasn't anything he wouldn't do. He didn't know any boundaries. He was considered, high up in society, part of the upper echelon. He was connected to all sorts of people who were important, and that's the only thing that kept him from getting even in more trouble than he was. He got bailed out a lot, but he would commit flagrant acts of sexual violence on people, and he ended up in the Bastille and other prisons also. Newgate, I can't remember if Newgate was one of them or not. I'm kind of confusing books a little bit. I think that was Captain Kidd. But he would end up in prison on sexual crimes, and who knows the extent of his crimes altogether. But here's the crux of the book, okay? He'd written a book called 120 Days of Sodom, and I can't remember. He wrote it in a very short amount of time while he was in prison, and this book shocked the French people. Like, there's a lot of stigmas that go along with French society, but even for them, it was appalling. But this has become a coveted piece of literature to own over the centuries, and it seems like no matter whose hands it fell into, it came along with the curse. Now, I'm going to make this short, okay? Part of the book has to do with a man named, I don't know if I'm going to say his name right, but I'm just going to give it to you the way I think it's said. Luritier. Okay, he had I think the Museum of Manuscripts and Letters, and he was somebody who came from very little. His father was a plumber, and he ended up becoming, Luritier became a collector of sorts. Well, I mean, he was a soldier to begin with, and then he got a divorce, was kind of financially devastated, became interested in the written word. The written word being anything that was, well, written. He believed that that things have changed so much in our world that very few people actually put pen to paper anymore, and that if you can find any kind of manuscripts, notes, letters, eventually in time, these will become very valuable. He started collecting them, especially from well-known individuals over time, and housed them in a museum. But what he would do is he would sell shares of this to people who could afford to pay lots of money, and then in 4 years' time, he would buy it back at an inflated price. But these people were paying so much. Here's the thing. It eventually became known as the biggest French Ponzi scheme in history. And it was quite a scandal. But the question that comes into mind over the course of the book is that part of the curse of 120 Days of Sodom? Because he was in possession of that, and in the end, he ended up losing it. Now it's in the possession of the French government, and all sorts of people want to see it. A lot of people avert their eyes when they start to read it because it's just so bad. Now, I personally, I found it fascinating. I haven't obviously read 120 Days of Sodom, nor do I have any desire to. But this was just an intriguing part of history. I recommend this book highly. I had a hard time putting it down. I really did. And this is written by Joel Warner. I hope that these have stimulated your imagination a little bit and made you want to read them for yourself. If you have read them, let me know. If you want to get them, click on the links down below. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and share this content. Tell your friends about my channel. All right, guys. I've loved talking to you. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.